fans, do you want to win your share of $100,000? Simply enter the houseofboxing.com Fight Night Prediction Challenge. Compete with boxing fans around the world. Simply head over to houseofboxing.com and sign up now.
This is Lewis Hart for Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store and houseofboxing.com. Delighted today to be joined with Dan Hardy. I think we've just about recovered from Riyadh. I can't really believe what I saw on Saturday night. I'm sure you had a bit of belief more than other people, but Tyson Fury defeats Francis Ngannou by split decision in a way that nobody thought that fight would go. What are your thoughts after sort of a few days out from the fight?
Honestly, I mean, I'm still just in a very kind of happy place with it for Francis and for, what he was able to achieve. My feeling about the fight is still the same. When I scored it on the night, I had it 96-93 for Ngannou. I gave him the first 4 rounds. I gave him 7 and 8. And obviously had the knockdown in the third. So for me, he was winning on the scorecards. I came back and I watched it a few more times when I got home, and I still score it the same pretty much. I could probably sway back and forth on the first round going to Fury. But for me, Ngannou, even after the 4th round, I was like, he's done enough now. It doesn't really matter what happens in the rest of the fight.
Yeah.
He's already kind of proved people wrong, and including me. I mean, I'm getting a bit of, like people are saying, oh, you must be really happy and stuff. But I predict Fury to win. I thought Fury, which again is why it makes it so impressive. Like the majority of the MMA world even knew that this was a very, very tough test for him. But I expected Fury to start picking it up after the 4th, 5th round, and ultimately he just wasn't able to. I was very, very impressed.
Do you think Fury underestimated Francis in a way? As the fight grew, Francis grew more in confidence. I think it was sort of around the second, or it might have been the second or the 3rd round, where Fury got caught with a really good left hook. And I think it just woke him up. Do you think he underestimated him a little bit?
I do think he did. Yeah, I mean, I would say, looking at his condition and his mobility, I would say that he looked like he was kind of halfway through a training camp for Usyk. It was the perfect storm for Ngannou, where I think Fury was maybe looking a bit past him, thought this was going to be a good sparring session to promote the Usyk fight. But yeah, I agree. It was that left hook that cut him on the forehead, kind of left hook. And like you saw Fury's eyes kind of roll for a second, like, my goodness, that was power. I don't necessarily know that he underestimated Francis. I think he could have certainly, like, if he was the same fighter that came in against Deontay Wilder, then it would have been a much more difficult fight for Ngannou, definitely. But I think more than anything, he underestimated the type of fighter that Ngannou was going to be, and we're all guilty of that. Like, even if his coaches knew. I was chatting to Eric Nixick the night before the fight, and he had this kind of wily smile on his face, like, yeah, everyone's saying the right things and you're all wrong. Like, no one was expecting him to come out and fight at range, right? Like, I feel like Tyson Fury had prepared for a fighter that was going to be in his face, head in his chest, throwing big shots over the top, and he was going to be able to hold on to him and make him miss and wear him out. I think it was, I mean, perhaps maybe a little bit underprepared, but a lot underprepared for the version of Fury of Ngannou that he got.
And when you talked about it round by round, and when we look at the fight round by round, obviously in the 4th round where he put him down, but also in the 8th round where he had so much success, where he couldn't miss with Fury, he was catching him with really good shots. So you look at how well Francis has done, like applying his size and such a good performance from him.
Yeah, I mean, like, we knew he was strong, but I didn't realize he was going to be that strong in the clinch. And I think that was a surprise for Fury as well. When he did lock up, I think he thought he was going to be able to kind of hold and control him a bit better than he was. But Ngannou was doing a good job of kind of shaking free and building a good frame with that lead hand so he could keep punching him with the right. And yeah, I'm fighting from the outside. Like if I'm Tyson Fury and the guy's not attacking me, then I've got to try and instigate his attack. I've got to use my feints. And Fury was feinting all night. And Ngannou, in the back of his head, and if you listen to his interview last night, he talks about this. From the first round, he was thinking 10 rounds. So from the first round, he was thinking, I can't do too much in this round because I want to see the 10th round and I want to be fresh for it if I do. So because of that, he wasn't biting on the feints that Fury was throwing at him. Fury kept giving him the impression he was going to come, but Ngannou was just kind of patiently waiting with his stance, like maintaining good shape, maintaining his composure. And honestly, if he'd have been biting on those feints, he would have probably got tired quicker. Very, very impressive performance by him, and difficult to understand how someone can be that controlled in their pro debut on that kind of stage.
One thing I did want to ask you about, and it could easily sort of be a bit of a mistake, but there was a sequence in the fight where Fury threw a jab, then he tried to, I don't know if he tried to throw a right hook, but it looked extremely like an elbow. Didn't really cause Francis much problems, but do you think that was sort of just a missed right hook, or do you think there was some intention there?
Well, I mean, I've watched it back a few times. To me, if I saw that in a fight and someone landed that elbow, I would give them credit for throwing the elbow that he landed. I wouldn't think, well, he meant to throw a punch and caught him with the elbow. He may not have intended to throw it, but the direction of the punch was going down towards the canvas, which makes it look to me like he was trying to catch him with the elbow on the forehead. And that was really the only time I saw Ngannou take a moment and kind of open his eyes like, hang on, what was that? That didn't feel like a boxing glove. Yeah, it was a little trick from Fury on the inside, and I would have expected that from him.
Definitely. And one thing with Francis is his whole career he's been proving people wrong. Everyone did say he fumbled the bag by leaving the UFC and not taking the John Jones fight. Now with obviously with the PFL and his whole career, his whole life has really been proving people wrong. So do you feel like them 10 rounds we saw were sort of epitome of Ngannou's life in a way, whether he got the decision or not?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way of putting it. People have counted him out, whether it was, in his childhood when he was saying that he wanted to be a professional boxer and people counting him out, or whether it was when he was traveling across an ocean on a raft, to try and get to Europe. Like I'm sure people were telling him that he couldn't do it and he wasn't going to do it. You'll never be a UFC champion, etc., etc. He is in the business of proving people wrong, and he's just done it on the biggest stage in the world of combat sports. And I have to expect him to keep doing it, right? He's going to be ranked by the WBC. I expect him to have more boxing matches. I expect him to beat some familiar names that people wouldn't expect him to. And I think, we could genuinely be looking at a person that could have the WBC belt on one shoulder and the PFL belt on the other, which would be wild.
It goes on to what I was going to say, what do you think is next for him? Do you feel like sort of the next step would be another boxing match or PFL, or do you feel like it's good for the PFL to be flexible for, like they let with Clarissa Shields, that, if you can do MMA, but you can also box as well?
I mean, I think of course it's smart for the PFL to work with Francis and support him no matter what he wants to do. I would love to see him in the smart cage, absolutely. And I think, with his boxing skills and his mentality now coming out of that fight, going into mixed martial arts, we're going to see him take on a whole nother level again. I mean, it's unfortunate now. Obviously, John Jones is out, and looks like Stipe is going to be kind of sidelined until Jones is back. Like the heavyweight division in mixed martial arts has kind of slowed down a little bit. Now we've got the global championships coming up on Black Friday. We've got Henan Fajeda against Denis Goltsov, and honestly, both of those guys could be a real tough test in mixed martial arts for Francis. But you have to consider boxing matches as well. And if he decided he wants to pursue a rematch with Fury, if he wants to, call out Anthony Joshua or take on Deontay Wilder or something like that. I mean, me personally, I can't speak on behalf of the whole PFL, but me personally, I would be very much in support of that. Because as a combat sports athlete, you have goals in mind. Like, you remember when Anderson Silva wasn't allowed to box Roy Jones, and he was, you saw it in his performances. He was like, I don't want to be here. I just wouldn't want to put a fighter in that position, because I want them to achieve what they've set their mind to. And I think he could be a champion in boxing. And I think if he wants to pursue that, he should. And of course, we would love to see him back in the smart cage, and welcome boxers over to the smart cage. Like, I was in Atlanta the other week, and I managed to get my hands on a pair of double XL PFL gloves because I knew Deontay Wilder was coming to the interview point. So when he came over, I passed the gloves to him and he put them on, and like there was a little twinkle in Deontay Wilder's eyes, thinking to himself, I could really do some damage with these things. Yeah. So he talked about it. Like, we might see Deontay Wilder come over and fight in mixed martial arts, even a hybrid rules fight, even Fury if he wants to. I think the doors are open now, especially with what Ngannou was able to do. And I think boxers will say, well, if you can do as well in our sport, maybe we can do as well in yours. And then we'll start seeing some crossovers going the opposite way.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to talk about the Deontay Wilder fight, because obviously he talked about willing to go into MMA. how realistic of a proposition do you think that is? We don't really see it much in we don't really see it much. The sort of the boxers coming over. I think Ray Mercer versus Tim Sylvia and Randy Couture, who was actually there ringside against James Toney. How do you feel like sort of that'd be an incredible thing if we did see a superstar like Wilder come over to the PFL and in MMA?
It would be amazing. I mean, it would probably be the most watched fight ever. Because I think there'd be a lot more intrigue in a high level heavyweight professional boxer putting on the small gloves and stepping into the smart cage. I think that would be a fascinating. I mean, I even spoke to a bunch of the guys out in Riyadh, like Cole Frampton and the other guys I was working with, and I said, if this was an MMA fight between Fury and Ngannou, do you think it would be more or less popular? And every single one of them said more. They said it'd be more interesting because we would be seeing something unknown of Tyson and people would want to tune in and see. And honestly, like, I feel like Tyson would take well to mixed martial arts. We saw his elbows already. I feel like he could have a few kicks, and I feel like he would do well in MMA. Wrestling's going to be a big problem for him because of his build, but like Tim Sylvia did all right, and he was a very kind of tall, awkward looking heavyweight champion. But Deontay Wilder's a supreme athlete. And he is a fighter first and foremost that has good boxing skills. He's a thunderous puncher. I mean, like, he should be tested for the most powerful punch on the planet. Like, I know Ngannou's got the record, but that's because we haven't tested other guys. And I think Deontay Wilder would be up there as well. And stylistically, you've got to think that Fury is one of the most difficult tests for Ngannou, whereas Wilder, because he's a power puncher, he's a bit of a gunslinger in the way that he fights. There are bigger opportunities for Ngannou to catch him with big shots himself. So big gloves or small gloves, I think that fight makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. We'll get on to other PFL business in a minute, but one thing I did want to ask you about was, obviously next for Tyson Fury is Alexander Usyk. Does this have concerns for Fury after this performance, or does it make it more interesting where both Usyk and Fury have thrown chinks in their armor?
I kind of feel like Tyson Fury he's the kind of person he's going to be very honest with himself. He's going to look at that last performance and he's going to think to himself, you know what? I could have been better. I could have been sharper. I could have been lighter. I could have had a better game plan that had more adaptability in it, etc., etc. And these are all things that he's going to take into that training camp for Usyk. I think Usyk would have had an easier time with Fury if Fury would have just kind of rolled through Ngannou. But the fact that he had a big wake-up call there is going to really kick him into gear and motivate him for when he steps in there against Usyk. Because he's not now proving himself as the heavyweight king. He's now got to remind people, because he didn't look like it at the weekend. And I think that's a massive motivating factor. So if anything, Usyk's going to have a far more difficult fight than he would have done if Fury was successful.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get on to more business with the PFL. They're December the 8th. They're back in Dublin. Always brilliant to be around Irish MMA. As I said, there's another exciting card where we see the likes of Brett Johns, Tom Breeze, very familiar to UK fans. Dakota Ditcher's back out. How excited are we to be back out in Dublin for the PFL?
Oh, I can't wait. Some of my favorite memories of being at mixed martial arts events were in Dublin. Colin McGregor against Brandao was one of the highlights of my entire MMA career. And the Dublin crowd they are ferocious in their support. It's going to be a party atmosphere. It's going to be absolutely packed. I've made sure that we've got loads and loads of fighters on the card that bring that kind of intensity and excitement. And this is the first time ever that an event is going to have 4 European titles on the card. We've got lightweights, bantamweights, women's flyweights with Dakota and Valentina, and then of course the men's light heavyweights with Simeon Powell and Jacob Neddo. So we're going to have 4 champions crowned that night. Every one of those champions is going to win $100,000. And then the rest of the card is stacked. You mentioned some of the names, two big names that I wanted to sign. I've been wanting to sign for a while, Brett Johns and Tom Breeze. Like, Tom Breeze for me is one of the best fighters. Well, they both are. I mean, Brett Johns was ranked as one of the best bantamweights on the planet. His career in the UFC and Bellator prove how good he is, and he's been sidelined for a bit, and I know he's been desperate to get back in there. So this opportunity, he's going to make the most of it. And Tom Breeze is a silent assassin. You know, like people will underestimate Tom Breeze and what he's capable of. But if you look at what he's done since he left the UFC, he went over to Levels Fight League in Holland, and he's picked up 2 titles, middleweight and light heavyweight. And I've been on the mats watching him sparring, and he is something else. I am very, very excited for both of those guys on the card. And honestly, I mean, the card's stacked. Like Don Woodin's going to be back against Ben Davis. I've got McGrillen on the card, although I'm having to find a new opponent for him. He is very, very difficult to match, Lewis McGrillen. I'm working on that today, but yeah. And then, you know, some Irish favorites. We've got 2 Nathan Kellys on the card. You know, the young Nathan Kelly who's going to be fighting amateur, and then the PFL Nathan Kelly, who, I mean, what a homecoming it's going to be for him to, you know, he's been traveling around and fighting in the US, to be able to come back to Dublin and fight there. He's going to bring his performance to a new level. And I think the crowd's going to really appreciate him.
Definitely. And where you look at 2023 with PFL Europe and them trying to expand, how successful would you say it's been, where you've had Berlin, Newcastle, Paris? It's been sort of must have been a very, very good time for yourself.
It's been an amazing year. It really has. I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I actually started working for the PFL Europe in the head of fighter ops capacity in like 2 weeks before the Newcastle card. Yeah. I was focused on, you know, Veronica was in training camp for UFC London, so I didn't want to get started too soon. So the global matchmaking team were doing a good job matching everybody, and I just kind of left them to it. But now I'm ready to take over. And after this year, I've learned, you know, what we did well, what could have been done better. You know, how we can better utilize the fighters that we've got and be more prepared for the shows that are coming up. It's been a real good learning experience for me. But if you look at what we've done, I mean, Newcastle was a fantastic event. First event for PFL Europe was incredible. You know, loads of finishes, loads of great performances. You know, a real celebratory atmosphere in there as well. And then Berlin, I mean, you know, that was lightweights and bantamweights. It was some of the most competitive fights that I was expecting were in those 2 weight classes, and I think that was an incredible show as well. But then it all pales in comparison to Paris, right?
Yeah.
that was an event that nobody could have really predicted. You know, we had, not only did we have great playoff fights all the way through, you know, very, very competitive, but we had 2 superstars at the top of the card. You know, the Lazy King, I've been watching his career coming through Aries. He's something special. And he's going to be going over onto the global roster in lightweight next year, which is even more terrifying. And then the superstar that is Cedric Doumbé. Like, those kind of athletes come through very, very occasionally. And the way that he was able to command that fight week and hype the fight, and, you know, the walkout with the mattress, and then the 8-9 second knockout with Kylian Mbappé sitting cage side. It was a bigger event than we could have anticipated. I couldn't be more proud of the team.
Well, as we look back on 2023, we must look forward to 2024. What can we sort of expect without revealing too much? But what is sort of your plan for 2024?
Well, I'm already signing people now. I'm already building the roster for 2024. I'm going to switch out one of the weight classes that we did this year, just because some of the weight classes are a lot deeper than others, and they're a lot more competitive. And there is, like, what I'm looking for is fighters that are going to potentially be European champions that can then step into the world scene and take on, you know, the likes of Sadabusi and Magomed Kerimov, which is a big ask. They're terrifying individuals, but we've got great fighters around, and welterweight for me is a big weight class. So I want to bring that in next year. We've got lightweights, and we've got bantamweights, and we've got women's flyweights. Some fighters will be moving on to the global roster. Some fighters will be coming back. So there'll be some familiar names next year, but a lot of new faces as well. And, you know, we'll do probably 4 shows next year. I keep trying to push for 1 more because I've got so many fighters that want to be competing. But yeah, we'll see what the shows look like next year. They're going to look a little bit different. I'm going to structure them a bit different. And I'm going to be bringing in some veterans of the game who can kind of, you know, sit in feature positions on the card and set some examples for these young'uns, because the veterans of the game, they're like, right, time's running out. I've had 35 fights. Let's have 5 more and let's see what we can do. So I've got some really exciting fighters that are very, very familiar to people that are going to be on those cards as well.
Absolutely, Dan. It's been a pleasure catching up with you. Always enjoy it talking to you. As always, as I like to do, if you want to give a plug to your YouTube, your Twitter, your Instagram, where people can find you.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I'm on everything. Dan Hardy MMA is my handle, and then if you're searching me on YouTube, either search Dan Hardy or Full Reptile, and you'll find you'll find all of my breakdowns and stuff. And I've just done a short one on the Ngannou Fury fight as well. So if anyone's interested in a bit more depth of the explanation, then you can find it there.
Absolutely. I'll be linking that in the description. Dan, thank you as always for catching up with you. And yeah, hopefully catch up with you soon, mate. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Always
Cheers.
good talking to you.